There's a climate of imminent doom in Ukraine. It's a new plan. Zelensky wants to recruit all Ukrainians now. Zelensky seems to have already made disastrous decisions. First, to conscript all Ukrainians, and second, to extend martial law indefinitely. The Ukrainian leadership has fallen into despair, seeing that the counteroffensive, which started June 4th, 2023, is faltering, and facing multiple layered Russian defense, Ukrainian army records dramatic losses, while the destruction of Western equipment is unprecedented, and fearing the tragic failure of the counteroffensive will lead the West to cut off military aid, but mostly fearing his political future, which is bleak. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is hatching plans that could well be described as suicidal. Ukraine's total casualties since the start of Russia's operation were in the hundreds of thousands. The leftover must include the millions of Ukrainian refugees who left the country mainly for Europe and Russia. They left, but also the reduction of the population in the last 30 years due to the deterioration of the standard of living. It should be noted that Ukraine in 1991 had a population of 51 million, and now it's barely reaching 30 million. Catastrophic decisions, war to the last Ukrainian, and martial law forever. So Zelensky in this way seems to have already taken disastrous decisions. First, to conscript all Ukrainians, and second, to extend martial law indefinitely. In other words, they won't even be able to leave. You can imagine martial law what it is. It's recalling that Ukraine has already carried out successive mobilizations, including among the conscripts people of old age and with health problems. The ground for Zelensky's decision is cultivated by the publication of the Ukrainian newspaper Novoye Izdanie, whatever that means, and the statements of Ukrainian MP Alexander Dubinsky. Ukraine will have to recruit hundreds of thousands more people, said the head of the Come Back Alive Foundation, Taras Shmut. Ukrainian newspaper Novoye Izdanie reports, as Pravda writes. According to Shmut, Ukrainian military personnel at the front should be rotated so that they can rest. This is a problem now, he said. Those who are in the trenches for a year and a half must rest to recover normally. To do that, they have to be replaced by someone, he explains. Mass conscription in winter. For his part, Ukrainian MP Alexander Dubinsky announced on his Telegram channel that Ukraine plans to declare large-scale conscription from the winter, while martial law will be extended at least to the end of 2024. This protracted counteroffensive, which must be considered in advance, will require the deployment of large numbers of military personnel, he says. The accumulation of military material that you see requires, if not general, then a very extensive mobilization, he says. The reorganization of military commissars, retraining, and sending new people. This is preparation for large-scale mobilization, Dubinsky says. In the winter, the Ukrainian authorities should proceed with a mass mobilization of Ukrainian citizens in an attempt to change the situation, he says, and he believes that martial law in Ukraine will be extended at least until the end of 2024. The latest round of military aid. At the same time, the West is poised to push a new wave of military supplies into Ukraine, possibly the last, while the Ukrainian military is being defeated on front lines. The much-anticipated counteroffensive failed, but NATO is rearming Ukrainian soldiers with new supposedly game-changing weapons for a more aggressive operation in the autumn. U.S. Army Undersecretary for Logistics and Technology Douglas Ross Bush has already said that the first batch of Abrams tanks has finally been approved for deployment to Ukraine. The tanks, along with all the necessary equipment, should arrive by early autumn, he says. Although various sources report that more than 12 Abrams tanks are already in Ukraine, Kiev will not receive the M1A2 series, but the obsolete M1A1s. It's noted that 31 tanks are intended for Ukraine, and this number corresponds to a battalion of tanks. In the current situation, this number is not enough to compensate for the heavy losses of the Ukrainian army. The European allies are closely following Washington. French President Emmanuel Macron recently promised to deploy long-range Scalp missiles from the French military reserves, and in turn Germany is preparing to deploy Taurus long-range cruise missiles. Earlier, Berlin officially denied such a claim of imminent doom in Ukraine for suicidal step Zelensky, who plans to recruit all Ukrainians. Zelensky seems to have already made the decision, and there's a possibility, but following the deployment of the British Storm Shadow system, the Ukrainian military, the deployment of Taurus missiles is only a matter of time. According to the Bundestag of Germany, only 150 of the 600 missiles are now in operational condition, but the shortage is not stopping Berlin, and in fact Ukrainian bombers are being modified to carry these German-Swedish-made missiles. Carnage without end? The transfer of Taurus will expand the Ukrainian arsenal of precision weapons and increase the target destruction range up to 500 kilometers. However, the limited number of missiles and bombers remaining in the Ukrainian Air Force will not allow them to be used en masse, but only to carry out individual targeted strikes, at least until NATO sends, if it eventually does, its fighter jets to Ukraine. In response, the Russian military continues preemptive strikes on strategic Ukrainian infrastructure, warehouses in the Khmelnytsky and Rivne regions, where British Storm Shadow missiles were likely stored, were recently destroyed, and at the same time Kiev proudly proclaims that the supply of new advanced weapons will lead to victory, as the Javelin, Bayraktar, and Leopard did. Conclusion: NATO is doing everything it can to force Ukrainians to continue their massacre, protecting the interests of the West. And this is from Banking News. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.